Hi, this is Ela, and I'm going to talk to you about watercolor materials. The biggest challenges I find with students when talking about materials is that because students haven't painted before, they think that they should use student quality or cheap paint paper and brushes. They're always looking for a deal. They are starting from scratch and they have to buy everything, and they're concerned about cost, and they think that they just don't deserve good materials. The problem with this attitude is that they have this idea that once they start making pictures that look good, then they deserve good materials, and actually they're setting themselves up to fail. Because it's very hard to make a good picture, even if you're very good, with crappy materials. Cheap kid quality materials don't behave the way that we expect, that you want. So I will tell you how to cut corners and still get good results. But by and large, a lot of these materials I'm recommending are the same quality as I use in my daily practice. So first and foremost, I think the most important thing is good paper. You cannot do really good wet into wet work with really cheap paper. The one that probably makes me the most angry is there's a Canson XL, which is always on sale, like right next to the cash register. It's got a blue cover, and it's only on sale for $5 or whatever. And it says watercolor on big letters on the cover. You're like, well, it must be watercolor paper. It says it on the label. Why can't I use this? And the answer is because it's not going to behave. It's not going to do what you want. So what I recommend is, you see how many, I have all of the kinds of arches watercolor. This is my favorite. Can you tell? This is my favorite. So the different colors reflect the texture of the paper. All of these are 100% cotton. You know it because it says 100% cotton on the cover. If it doesn't say 100% cotton, you can be sure it isn't. It's made out of wood pulp. And while you can do cute pictures with wood pulp, the exercises that I'm going to show you it just won't behave the way that you want. This is also 120 pound, which means that you can see this is really quite stiff. There's even stiffer. There's 300 pound, which is like cardboard. You can barely bend it. This is closer to like maybe a playing card in how stiff it is. And there's 12 sheets in here. So all of these are 140 pound, all 100% cotton. This is hot press. So this is very smooth. If you like to draw very fine detail, if you're very graphic, then this is a good paper for you. If you like to do, washes, let it dry, do another wash of color, let it dry, not doing a lot of wet into wet technique, not having the colors run together, letting each bit be dry so you have lots of hard edges, this is very good for that. These other two both have more texture. This is probably the most popular one of all. This is cold press. This is what I use most of the time. And you can hear that there's texture there. This is cold press paper. It's just got some texture to it. This is rough press. This is and you can see I have a painting here. This has got even more texture, even more rough. What's so awesome about these is that texture makes it so that the paint if you're going to do wet into wet technique, if you're going to lay two colors next to each other while they're still wet, they're going to have to climb over those hills and valleys to blend with each other. So you can get these really nice controlled gradations from one color to another. Also really good if you like to work more loosely, if you're more of an impressionist sort of painter. It's just a little bit less graphic, more artistic, I'll just put it like that. So these are really nice. If you're not sure what to get, this is it right here. Also, this is a block. You can see how big it is. one of the sad things about Arches, I don't recommend blocks. They are the most expensive way to purchase paper. And what it means by a block is that the sides, and you can see it's popping apart. It's separating, and this is because this company's been bought out. The paper's still good, but the glue that they use now to manufacture it is not as good. But originally this was all glued together on this edge. And right here on the top, you can see these sheets. You could stick your knife and pop those sheets apart if you wanted to, but now they're just popping out on their own. The idea is that you would do your picture, you would paint your whole picture while it was still attached to the block. Once your picture is dry, you could pop it off and then start your next picture. But that's a little not... I don't recommend this. I recommend that you get a pad. This is a pad of paper. So it's all loose and free. This is much less expensive. You're just already open to the fact that each piece of paper is, you can just reach it if you wanted to. Not a problem. I have a couple of other brands if you don't want to do Arches. If you want to try something else, here's a couple of other brands I recommend. So I already wrote Arches, but Blick Premier. Don't do the other Blick papers, only do Premier. They make some cheaper papers that don't behave as well, but Premier is 140 pound, 100% cotton, very similar to Arches. Fabriano Artistico is another one that Fabriano makes cheaper papers. Don't buy the other ones. Buy the Artistico. It is also 140 pound cold press, 100% cotton. This is what you want. So they're very similar. You're going to get the same results with all of those. So that's my talk on paper. Quick, additional information. If you're a vegetarian, if you are vegan, Arches does use an animal-based glue to hold it all together. It is not a vegetarian product. It smells slightly of wet dog when you get it wet. Whereas I know that Fabriano and I suspect also Blick both use a more modern, non-animal based binder to hold it all together. So that's something to keep in mind. Arches is very old school. They're following a very old formula, which is why it's so good, but also why it is not as animal friendly, because that's in the old days they did what they wanted. Next I'm going to talk about is paper. And I'm going to show you an example. So these are not the most expensive. Excuse me. I talked about paper. Talking about paint. Let's get my words right. This is paint. So the Cotman watercolor set is a very good set. It is not professional. None of these are professional quality, but you can use them with professional paints. Here's my set. This is actually a 16 set, and a little confusing because I stuck some extra ones on the bottom. But there's a lot of, there's a little bit more other fillers in these products than the professional quality. The pigments that they use are cheaper, but the color is still really good. And, you know, you can't really tell when you look at a painting whether or not it's this brand, one of these guys, or whether it's a true professional brand. What you really want to avoid are those really cheap kid sets that are very matte. You get these big giant pans of paint, and they're very pastel colored, and they're not shiny at all. The Prang sets are a little bit better than those really matte ones, but there's still problems with them. If you want me to see a close comparison of a bunch of papers and paints, there's some others on my YouTube page. But these are all half pan size. If you want to see what a full pan size looks like, this is what full pans look like. So this is Cotman with a few extras on the bottom. This is what full pans look like. You don't see full pan size pans very often. This is the St. Petersburg White Knights, right here on the bottom. I bought these in a cardboard box on purpose, and then I bought this palette separately. And I think the whole thing was maybe 40 or 50 bucks, which is a very good deal for how big these pans are, how many colors there are, and getting a really good metal palette instead of these cheap plastic ones, which tend to stain easily. You'll notice that the dark colors look almost sort of blackish. It's kind of hard to tell what color they are unless you get them wet and test them out on some paper. That's a good sign. It means that they're very transparent. They're like stained glass. You think about, you know, if you have a sheet of stained glass and you don't hold it up to the light, it might look black. You know, you need the light, the paper shining through it to be able to see the color. These guys over here where you can really see what color they are, they're much more opaque. They're not quite so transparent, which is fine. But, you know, traditional watercolor is very transparent. You're relying on the paper to lighten it up. You're not adding white to it. There's some white in this set. You'll notice there's no white at all in this set. You don't really need white to paint with watercolor. And you can see I added some blobs of some other colors that I liked up here on the top of the palette. You can do that if you want to. As you paint more and more and talk to different artists, you'll find out about other colors that you like. So this is St. Petersburg. I think you can get this at jacksons.com. I think that you can also get it from, there's a couple of online art supply resources where you can buy this one. This you can buy at any Blick. This is a very easy one to find, Cotman. Another thing to make sure you don't get mixed up, you'll notice that it says Winsor & Newton on here. This is not Winsor & Newton paint. What's there? I mean, it's a branch of Winsor & Newton paint. It's the student Cotman branch of Winsor & Newton. If it doesn't say Cotman, then you have the professional quality, which is much more expensive. The pigments are much more expensive as well, and the colors will look a little bit different. But I use my Cotman set, and it is lovely, but little by little I am replacing all these colors with the professional quality. I ran out of this yellow, and I put in some of the professional brand in its place. It's cheaper to buy a tube than it is to buy a new one of these little blocks. You can buy the individual little blocks and pop one out and put a new one in. But the cheapest way to replace your paint as you use up your colors is buy a tube. And I often will go, so I do have some Cotman. So here's some cadmium yellow pale, you know, that I could squeeze in there. But also I can go a little bit more professional. This is Daniel Smith. This is a professional brand, and I put this one right in here. So you literally just squeeze in some paint, let it dry, and you can just paint with it. It's totally compatible. I just put a little in there. Why not? You can make your own palettes from scratch. I took an Altoid tin. I spray painted it with varnish. I wrote the name of the colors on the lid. I glued some of those little empty pans. You can buy the empty pans at Blick. Squeezed the paint in there and glued them down. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt to make, but it's kind of cool being able to make your own sets. There's lots of different shapes of palettes. I like these guys a lot. I like this big mixing area right here. You can also, here's a big rectangular one. I have to put stickers all over the top. But you can see, this is a palette I use a lot. This is my personal palette. And I have all of my favorite colors. I've got ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson. I've got like a light red. I need to fill this thing up. It's getting used up. Indian yellow, light cadmium or lemon yellow. I've got a magenta. These I think were from a core chroma set. So you can customize your palette. And when I mix a color, I don't clean my palette very often. I'll often reuse these colors in other paintings. So this is something I use quite a lot, as you can tell. It's a big mess, but this is what it looks like when you're really a serious painter. All right. So I'm going to show you a little comparison of different qualities of paint. I keep talking about how some paint is better than others. Some products are better than others. So this is Sennelier Bright Red, and I did an exercise that I'm going to show you in a future video. So I did a little swatch of 3 very similar reds, Sennelier Bright Red. This is Cadmium Red Deep. This is Academy Cadmium Red Deep, and you'll notice how different. This is a much browner, duller, less bright color. And I did some black lines to see how opaque the paint was, and now I'm seeing how well the paint flows when I just do a swatch of paint with a bunch of water next to it. And then I did some drops of the paint on a wet surface. That one's really dramatic. You can see how the professional quality paint really flows. This is kind of the mid-range. This is the kind I'm recommending. You can see it doesn't flow quite as much. And then this is the cheapest. This is the Academy. And it just kind of sits there and it doesn't move. If you wanted to do a wet into wet technique, this one's going to give you trouble. It's not going to flow the way these guys do. And I tried the salt technique. This one wouldn't even do the salt technique. I put the salt on. Once again, I'll demonstrate these later. You put the salt on, the salt dissolves and creates this cool little texture pattern. This one failed. So there's nothing more frustrating than getting all ready to do a picture, using, pulling out your materials, giving it a try, especially if you're following along with an assignment and everyone else is getting one result, and you can't. And, if you're a beginner, you're going to think that it's your fault. You're going to blame yourself. You're going to go, I'm not meant to be a watercolorist. No, it's not you. It's the paper, or it's the paint, or it could be both. So, do yourself a favor. And, if you're really broke, just buy 3 tubes of Cotman paint for $15 or less. Could be, sometimes they're on sale for as little as $3. Get yourself a plate and just, you can do it without having to spend a lot of money. Okay, so last thing I'm going to talk about are brushes. And I think brushes are the thing, brushes are important, but they come last because I think that they're the thing that you can fudge on the most easily. So I do recommend that you do not buy a package of 5 brushes for $5 on Amazon. If you do that, I can positively guarantee you that you're going to have brushes that are going to drop hairs, that are not going to come to a nice point. You're going to be frustrated. What I do recommend is you go and you buy, Princeton is a brand that I seem to find all over the place, and I'm quite happy with it. And they've got a bunch of different, these are all Princeton. This is Princeton Aqua Elite. This is Princeton Lauren. This is Princeton Neptune. These two are actually the same. These are both size 10, and the only reason why one is more of a point than the other is because one of them's wet and the other one's not. But you can do almost anything you want with one of these brushes. It's nice to have more than one. If I don't want to get my paint dirty, I will switch back and forth between different brushes. I'm going to give you a little demonstration. So, you can do a really thin line. Right, you can go very thin. But you can also fill in an area very quickly because it's a number 10. It's a pretty big brush. You can go down to a 0 for very, very small. I don't know how big these get, but they get very big. They get, maybe close to a 15 or a 20. Here's a same brand. It just has to do with what type of materials they use in the bristles. There we go. So, there we go, better. So you can play around with this. It's a lot of fun. It's good to have those. You can get bigger ones, you can get smaller ones, but you can do a lot with just that. Here's, if you want to cover a large area quickly, This is a 1-inch wide flat brush. You can see how, you know, you can cover an area very quickly if you needed to. So this is a very useful brush. They get even bigger. Some brushes are more absorbent. Imitation Squirrel is great if you really want a brush that will hold a lot of water. If you're going to cover like a large surface. And this is another cool one. This is a different shape of brush here. This is actually a Cotman. Well, Cotman makes brushes too. And you can see how this is a fan brush. So you can do all sorts of cute little dots and textures. This is great for waves or wood. Just little tiny random dots. And once again, this is a fan brush and it comes in different sizes. This one's a 2. So that's pretty much it. That's what you need. I mean, obviously you also need a water container. I don't have much water in here, but when I paint, I will fill this up most of the way, and I'll often have a second container, and one will be dirty and one is more for clean water. So don't be stingy on the brushes. You can use toilet paper, you can have paper towel to dry your brushes on, or a rag. Yeah, and some droppers. So when I mix a color, I can just drop some water with my water dropper. And then I can just stir around. I can reactivate some paint that I'd used in another picture previously. And then test it out. Good to have extra paper. They can just, you know, it's not precious. You can just test it out and see what you think. All right. I think that's pretty much it for materials. Oh, pencil. Good old pencil. Eraser. You know. Mars. Plastic. You know, kneadable erasers are fun. You don't need a variety. I have a variety, but honestly, if all you have is this or this and a pencil, that's fine. And I also talked briefly about a pen, the Micron PN pen, which I have right here. Micron PN. Makes a very thin line, really good for drawing small shapes that you color in later, and it doesn't bleed. So I can paint on that, and that ink will stay put. Okay, have fun.